Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's sort of funny. I'm thinking Europe all the time, thinking of France, where I sort of live now. Back here in Hobart, it's 7 o'clock in the evening. There's perfect sunshine. There's long days here because we're so far south and it's our summer. And in fact, it's the longest day of the year down here and it's the shortest day of the year up there. So it's midwinter's day in the northern hemisphere and midsummer, well, the longest day of the year down here. And that always makes me think of Antarctica as well because it's spent so much time down there. Anyway, all very good, and hope you're having a good day wherever you are. So it's interesting looking at the weather just generally all across here. It's pretty stable, and we haven't had anything that I'd call it anywhere near like a serious gale so far. Touch wood, like we experienced in 2018, which is pretty good. But there is a big one coming which I'll tell you about in a minute. But it's a good big one, if there's any such thing. Okay, and you've probably seen the video clip from Kirsten, which was really cool. And Guy's still in Cape Town, waiting to set off, and we made a miscalculation. You probably saw that. He's got to maintain a pretty solid average speed of over 6 knots all the way to Hobart to make the gate. So going to be fun to watch and see how that evolves. And now let's have a look at the back end of the fleet. Elliot's actually, considering he hasn't got much up, is actually moving pretty well. He's doing, he was doing 6.6 plus, but this is the new position. He's still doing 6.1. He was doing 6.5 for the previous 4 hours, and the last 4 hours is 6.1. He's got a bit of weather coming. We alerted him to this lot. I forget exactly when. Yesterday we put him on weather alert, gave him a forecast. Ian's doing 6.8 knots now, really enjoying this northwesterly, and the sea's probably building at the same time. And we'll just expand on this and give you the weather as it rolls through while we're back here. Suhaili's catching up as well, but they're still ahead of Suhaili. So you can see Ian's got good sailing up there, and Elliot's going to cop a little bit of this stuff coming over the top of him. He's going to get 40s and gusting even higher, 45. Seas picking up, but he's taking it all on the port quarter, which is pushing the mast forward. It's not stressing the mast coming back. And he's reefed down to 2 reefs in the main and the staysail, which is, in fact, probably even less than that. He's probably got maybe 3 reefs in the main and a staysail pulling forward, because now he has to look at the balance of the boat as well. When it's when the strong wind's behind you or on the quarter, you don't want you want a little bit more pulling forward than you do behind the mast with the mainsail. So he could well be down to 3 reefs in the main. Anyway, this is tacking over every hour. So this is by late tonight. It disappears pretty quickly. This is where it gets interesting now. He'll have a very calm period for about 4 hours, and then it kicks in from the southwest. And so that's a colliding of the waves. So you've got a northwesterly that's been that way for many, many days. So there's a predominant northwesterly swell, and when it kicks to the southwest, there'll be another swell coming up. But it's not super strong, so you should be able to handle that quite well. But anyway, we'll keep watching that. And Ian gets a bit of that strong northwester, and then a slow rotation round to the southwest as it rolls through. This is going into tomorrow night. And then in the 23rd, and then they've got some pretty mild conditions. Elliot should be making his way north a bit, but you can see he's on the top end of this high here, and that'll give him slight headwinds. That's always the challenge. And Ian's got some southerlies, but it'll be a bit fluffy for a while. So they're both going to have close to a day of rubbish. And then Ian gets back into it, and even Elliot starts to come down from the north. So they've just got a day of fluffy stuff, light winds, still a reasonable sea running, but nothing to stress about. This is going into Christmas Day. By then Ian will be up here somewhere, nice sailing, and Elliot will be drifting around a bit here, something like that. So it looks like they've got a quiet Christmas Day. Anyway, all right, come back to real-time weather today, and I'll shrink this and see if we can get everyone into what's going on here. Jeremy was heading down to the zone prior to this because he had very light winds. Now he's moving at 3.6, so that's a bit better. The wind's picking up. That'll push him along, and Captain Goog's making a bit of a dive to the northeast. Now, we've put both Jeremy and Michael on weather alert for the 23rd. Around late on the 23rd, there's a big system coming through, which I'll show you in a minute. And the advice that we've given them is to get above 44 degrees south, which is the zone here. So that's the latitude of 44 degrees south, with the suggestion that getting north of 43 degrees south is even better, because the big blow is going to come in underneath them, and it's quite a big one. So that's what we've told him. So you can see Goog will be slowly making his way northeast. He's got a couple of days to do it. We told him this morning. You can see where he changed course, and so he's now heading up. And Jeremy should have received the news today, but he's already over 44, so he's probably not too stressed. He's a little bit further back as well, so you'll see what happens when we actually show you moving the weather forward. But for today, going along quite nicely, 82 miles in 24 hours, only 3.9 knots. Captain Goog is doing 6 knots. He's doing pretty well. He'd probably much rather be going straight for Hobart, because he's sailing a little bit off the course, but he's got to get out of this weather. And then up here we've got Abelish doing doing 4.3, and that's self-explanatory by this light area. Remember yesterday I said that they're going to have a little bit of fluff here, and Kirsten's doing the same, and then Simon's doing the same. Now it gets really complicated to try and work out where they're going to go, but there's a general trend with what's happening. And the interesting one is when you put the distance on it. I was projecting this about 7 days ago. So crikey's, Kirsten could get to within a couple of 100 miles by the time they're closing Hobart. Now Simon's just a bit under 200 miles out of Hobart, and I can twist this around here now and put it on Kirsten here. She's just under 200 miles from Simon, so that's pretty spot on. And the reason that's the case is because the weather forecasting off of Windy's been pretty good. What they were suggesting is going to happen did actually happen. Now this gets a bit tricky, because here what I'm going to do to show you the difference with Abelish, this is the equivalent of a course to Hobart. So that's where Kirsten would be the equivalent, because remember they were 200, 200, 200, and now Abelish is about 250. So in the scheme of things, you can say, to give you an accurate analysis, Simon's near enough to 200, Kirsten's near enough to 400, and Abelish is near enough to, or another 200, and then Abelish is another 250 miles behind, which is only 2 days. So it's kind of interesting, to say the least. And then just to give a perspective on Goog is about 700 miles behind Abelish, so that's cool. Now before I go into talking of this one, I'll just show you what's happening with the weather here, what we're expecting and why we're suggesting Jeremy and Goog move forward. So the 23rd, first of all I'll show you roughly where we'll work on Michael here. By the 23rd, it's a couple of days, so he's going to be about 300 miles in front. So he's going to be about here somewhere, and in fact we like him to be up about there, about 300 miles. So if you can just imagine that, straight under Bernard Matessia, the name Matessia, just in there. That's where he's going to be in a couple of days, late on the 23rd. So it's just in here. And I'll just animate this, because he's got a little front coming behind him. There's this system here. So he's got a southwesterly, then it's going to build from the northwest again. Jeremy's missed out on this, but he's got great sailing. So it goes northwest. That's a usual sort of Southern Ocean front. They come through every 24 hours, and that's the case because this is for tomorrow midday. So tomorrow midday, then it swings to the southwest. So he'll be riding that up from there. So he's got a good southwesterly, and here comes the big system now forming up. Now by then, Jeremy he'll be off the zone, and he'll be just in front of the zone, probably up a little bit. So you'll see he's going to just miss this one, right? He'll be right on the cusp of that. And in fact, when it's here, this is now midday on the 23rd, Jeremy should be just about here, so he's okay. Southwesterly wind is going to be blowing away. And you can see here why we wanted to get Goog up, because this is going to come across, and this is a forecast situation. It could change, of course. It could go further north or south, but there's 60, 70 knots in here, 9, 10 metre seas in the whole that whole area. Oh boy. So by then, this is now coming into late on the 23rd, and Goog should be then, we said under Matessia up here somewhere by then. And so if it rolls through from that, you'll see he's just going to get clipped by the back of it, which he should be able to handle. Because the other good thing is, if you notice that the wind doesn't change directions dramatically in a short period of time. Yes, it's a northwesterly here, but then it goes from a northwesterly slowly. It starts to turn into a west northwesterly, and then it starts to come into a westerly as it's progressing across, and then it'll slowly roll around into a southwest. And that is reasonably, not moderate, but it's sort of okay with the sea state. It's still not pretty, but it's not vicious. It's when you have the northerly that goes into a southerly within 20 minutes, it's dangerous. But that's if you can say that's a nice gale for the Southern Ocean, then that's the way I'd describe that. So anyway, we'll watch them carefully as we go through. Now we'll just quickly talk about the front pack here, the three of them, and I'll try and give you an understanding of what's likely to happen now. Oops, that's too far. It is really hard to predict, because when you get these areas, it might be no wind there, but it might be more than you think. So at the moment, Kirsten's on 3.4 knots, Simon's doing 5.5 knots, and Abelish is doing 4.3 knots. That's the weather we've got today. So I'm just going to talk it through and just animate it. I've got to click that to animate it, and then I can give you an impression. So you can see Simon's got that no wind zone in front of him, and it's still a headwind, so he's only been able to tack. You'll see Kirsten start to pick up a bit of breeze, and it's coming from the not a northerly, but it's got a little bit of west in it as well, and it's progressing that way. And she'll start sailing on that, heading straight to Hobart. She'll be able to maintain the port tack and do quite well, sort of heading up this way. So she's actually on her way to Hobart. Simon still won't be able to point to Hobart as the wind's slowly increasing. It's not a lot of wind, but he's got to tack into it because it's directly coming from Hobart, whereas Kirsten here's got a breeze. I don't need to talk much about Abelish. He's happy as. He's going to be boring down on Kirsten because he's got all this weather coming behind it, and he's going to ride it up. So Abelish is going to do well out of this. Kirsten's going to do okay. Simon's frustrating at that point, and this is up until late tonight. So, and then you can see potentially, again, Simon, if this is correct, he'll fall into a hole and maybe back to 2 knots or something like that. This is around midnight tonight. Whereas Kirsten, if she's lucky, she's going to get a northwesterly. So she'll be sailing well in that, depending on how strong of a northwesterly she gets. So she's closing the gap again on Simon. Abelish still heading home fast. So that's kind of cool. He'll be sailing faster than Kirsten and Simon, so it's going to bunch them up even more. Now it gets very tricky because you can see there's another pressure cell here, which is a low pressure forming with the winds coming this way. So wherever Simon is, the wind, as it starts to building, it's right behind him, and that's going to push him straight to Hobart. But this is about 3-4 o'clock tomorrow morning. Kirsten's still sailing. She's still got breeze closing the gap, but now Simon's underway again in a very light breeze, but look what happens. It turns into a big mess. Kirsten's still going to ride this a little bit closer, so I think she's doing all right. Abelish is still matching Kirsten in this. This is like calling a horse race. And then tomorrow afternoon, Simon's got a huge trap here. There's no wind around the bottom of Tassie, so he's got nowhere to go. I think Kirsten will be up here and she'll be drifting. Abelish is roaring along, right? So you're going to see Abelish take out maybe 80, 100 miles out of Kirsten, I reckon. He'll be down with 180 miles or 150 miles maybe to Kirsten very quickly. So that's kind of fun. And I'm not sure what's going to happen after that. It all gets a little bit too hard, other than the fact that you can see from the back here, you're looking a lot better than you are at the front. So Abelish has got it. He'll be running across here. And Kirsten at that point, which is late tomorrow, is going to start to pick up this breeze as well. And so the back end is going to push forward to the front end. And only about now are you going to see Simon, start to get some breeze. And that's in the morning of the 23rd. So I think my gut feeling is the earliest we're going to see Simon is sometime late on the 23rd. And where you've got Kirsten about 200 miles behind Simon at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised to see it turning into about 140 miles behind Simon once he gets in. So literally a one-day sail behind Simon if she's got breeze all the way into Hobart. And watch this. So imagine Kirsten's now sailing here. That breeze is pushing him straight into Hobart all the way up to the bottom there. So she is going to have breeze all the way into Hobart. and it's going to hold there for days because this is going through to Christmas Day. There's no changes. This is this big blow that Goog is getting out of, and the weather here is all favourable for Abolish and Kirsten to have a beautiful reach all the way up to Hobart. And the only time they'll be challenged is just at the last bit coming into the river, because you can see you get this local effect here where there's either no wind or it'll come down the other side of Tassie, but that's nothing compared to the challenges Simon would have had. So there's going to be some fun things happening in the next few days. Anyway, that's probably enough there, and yeah, it's